Hi again then guys, and welcome to a kind of video that I actually haven't done on the channel since relatively early on last year, in fact, and that is an unboxing or addition to my model car collection. And this one is more special, I would say, than the usual ones, because this is actually not an addition of two cars that I bought for myself. These are actually two vehicles that are becoming retroactively part of my collection from my dad, actually. And these were two cars that I surprised him with probably around a year to maybe a year and a half ago. And for those who don't know, I've mentioned it recently on the channel anyway, but he passed away around a week or so ago, and it seems kind of appropriate for those to stay in the family, if you will, for those cars to become part of my collection, to kind of have his taste in cars live on beside my taste in cars as well. And of course, many of you are familiar with some of the cars that I've bought before. Some of them are up here. I've got them scattered around the room. And one of them is actually here. Now, my dad was influenced a lot by Gran Turismo in terms of his favourite cars, and this was always one of his favourites, even as far back as, you know, Gran Turismo 2, and it is, of course, the Dodge Viper, in particular the RT10. Now, the RT10 is my personal favourite. I love it. It's the original, least powerful Viper, if you will, but there's just something about the style of the RT10 which I've always loved. This particular one is a Barago model. It actually had one of the nicest stands to go on of any of the cars. It was a full wooden stand. I've still got that, but as many of you know, I don't actually use the stands on the cars. The engine detail is gorgeous on this thing. The inside paint, it kind of shows up more on the camera than in real life, but the inside paint is a little bit lighter than the outside, which is probably due to its age as well. But yeah, the engine detail is pretty gorgeous on that one. The chunkiness of it is, as I've said with some of the other cars, one of the things that I really like about this. It's got trunk operation as well, and Barago do make some pretty nice looking models and good quality as well. This actually kind of reminds me of what I'd expect from Hot Wheels, because as I've said before, I'm a huge fan of Hot Wheels model cars, and I've got a number of those myself. Of course, the doors do operate as well. Now, I don't think my dad had a particular favourite Viper as such. He was a fan of this one. He was a fan of the GTS, which was the hardtop with the double stripes. He was even a fan of the red and white GTSR Team Orica race car in Gran Turismo as well. But this seemed to be the car that was kind of appropriate to get for him because it kind of encapsulates everything about that original Viper. It's just the Viper in its purest original form. And yeah, it just has a purity to it, which he definitely liked. Red is an obvious choice to go for as well, because there are other Vipers out there. But yeah, that one's going to be added to the collection. And it's one of the main cars, I think, that me and my dad actually shared a love for. Because a lot of the cars that I love, Dad wasn't necessarily so hot on. Like the TVR Speed 12, for instance. He was always kind of put off that car. He never really liked the look, which seems ironic from somebody who does like the Viper, because they're kind of similar looking cars. But yeah, this is one of the primary cars that we shared a love for, because even though the Viper isn't one of my absolute favourites, it is a car that I've always loved, and as I said, especially this original, and it's probably the only car I can think of that I actually think looks great with 3-spoke wheels, which is kind of a rare thing, I think, for a car to look good with that. So that's the first one that is going to become a part of my collection now. Dad really loved that one, but this car was the one that really surprised him, because this was always one of his favourite cars, in particular to use in Gran Turismo, because the Viper he loved more from just like a real-world perspective and in Gran Turismo, whereas there were certain cars that he loved specifically because of Gran Turismo. His favourite car of all time, for instance, was the Mazda 787B. And that was because of its introduction in Gran Turismo 3, and then, of course, on in the franchise. And he used to use it a lot. It was an awesome car. He loved the renowned livery. He also loved stuff like the original NSX, the first generation Lotus Elise. He always used to say that he liked to have a car that had a little bit of chunkiness, which is funny because that's what I say about many of my model cars as well. And yeah, he liked a car that looked kind of like a little pit bull, which the first generation Lotus Elise certainly does. But this particular car is the one that I surprised him with, I believe at the same time as the Viper. And yeah, he really loved this one. And of course, any Gran Turismo player will recognize this. The exposure is a little bit too high, so I'll try and adjust that. But yeah, the Mercedes CLK touring car, the CLK DTM, if you will. It's only called the CLK touring car in Gran Turismo. I'm not sure which brand this one is. Oh, this is a Maisto. This is a Maisto edition. I'm not sure if it's a Premier or not, because I believe they have like different categories of vehicle. But yeah, it's certainly not the kind of car that I would have ever bought for myself, because as much as I like it, it's certainly not one of my favourites. I do like the CLK DTM, and it is, I would say, one of the most iconic cars from Gran Turismo 3 and onward. Certainly when it comes to touring cars, it's one of the best all-round in the game. And yeah, Dad just loved the handling on this thing. It was such a pleasant car to work with all-round. This one does have operating doors as well. The steering is also functional, also. And you can see the full roll cage and everything in there. The DTM style steering wheel, obviously, well, the full DTM interior. And I believe that this one also has a screw underneath here, which you can take out. And then the complete front end actually detaches and you can see the engine, which is cool. I never really do that with mine. My Panos, for instance, the GTR one, which is up on the shelf there, the purple one, that has a detachable bonnet, but I never really bothered to do it because you have to take the screws out and then they inevitably get lost, so I don't really bother. But yeah, he loved this car from more of a usability point of view. He loved the Viper, as I said, in a real-world sense, but he loved the CLK touring car specifically because of how good it was in Gran Turismo. And I would say that there were a couple of cars for him that he felt that way about. I can think of at least 3 primarily. There was this one, the CLK touring car. He also absolutely loved the Gillette Vertigo, especially in Gran Turismo 3, but then in Gran Turismo 4, it wasn't quite as competitive, and it was also a different version. He liked the original, the red one with the, I think it was a dolphin picture on the side or something like that, and then it became yellow later on. And also, another one of his favourites was the Camaro LM Race Car. The kind of late 90s era Camaro with the 2 doors and the very big back end. The one that came with, I believe it was green or yellow tinted headlights, and it came with a white livery down the side, and then you could choose like black, red, green or blue livery over the top. He loved that one as well, because in effect that thing handled kind of like this. The handling was very touring car-esque. And yeah, those are the 2 new additions to my collection. As I said, it seemed kind of appropriate, rather than, you know, selling them or giving them away or something like that, to be kind of a reversal, if you will, of a hand-me-down, a hand-me-up, if you will. Instead of a dad buying something for his son, it was the other way around, and then these default to my collection. So, like I said, I think it's a nice little way of keeping it in the family, keeping them in the collection, and thankfully I do have just about enough space to add these 2 to the collection, and yeah. So now Dad and his choice of cars and favourite cars will be a part of this collection as well. And if you haven't checked out the previous unboxings, many of which are literally unboxings, which I know many of you love with the sped up chipmunk style audio as well, then of course click the playlist here on screen, which should be here, to see those. But until next time, I'll see you then. And for now, as always, thanks for watching.